Hello, this is Stuart Roberts, founder of Haircuts for Homeless, and welcome to the Hear Me, See Me podcast. I'm going to be talking to people who are truly inspirational to me. Some you may have heard of, and some you haven't, but you really need to hear their story. Hello, this is Stuart from Hear Me, See Me podcast. Today I've got a lovely lady who I know very well. She's our team leader in Croydon for Haircuts for Homeless. We've had a bit of an up and down with Haircuts for Homeless in Croydon, but that's for later in the story. But to begin with, I want to introduce you to Annabelle Richards. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Stuart, how are you?
Very good. Before we go into the Haircuts for Homeless story about it, tell us a bit about yourself, like, you know, where you come from, love.
Well, yeah, I come from Croydon, born and bred. Some people call it the Bronx. I call it South London. Some people won't. Some people will say it's Surrey.
Yeah.
But I think officially now it's Greater London.
Yeah.
I live on the London side of Croydon, and it certainly feels a bit more like London than other parts of it. But yeah, it's a very mixed borough. We've got very wealthy parts of the borough, and we've got very poor parts of the borough, which I think is a similar story through London, right?
London,
but
really.
Yeah. So, but it's my hometown. I love it. It's very up and down, like Haircuts for Homeless in Croydon. And at the moment, unfortunately, it's going through a bit of a down period. The council have had a lot of problems with finance and stuff. But you know what? The community is amazing. Like, it really is. Especially where I live. Like, we all look after each other. Yeah. And I like being part of the community, and that's partly why I started up Haircuts for Homeless. I always wanted to give back in my career at some point. I was just waiting for the right time, and I can't remember the year. Was it 2016, 17, something like that?
Probably, yeah. It was quite early on, about 17, I would think. Yeah, it's quite early
on. Yeah, and I had the opportunity to sort of become completely self-employed in my work, so I thought I could fit this in. And I think I found you on Google, Stuart. I didn't even know about Haircuts for Homeless.
Googled me. But I think as well, what struck me immediately when we first met, you're a Croydon girl and you absolutely love Croydon. I used to say you work on the tourist board because you really do shout out for Croydon, don't you?
Yeah. Well, it's got so much going for it. And unfortunately, we've not been represented by the people that look after the borough. They haven't embraced the culture. Like, there's so much of it, you know, especially musically. We have huge, like, dubstep was created here. Garage was not created here, but we played a huge part in the garage movement. Yeah. And then you've got, like, lots of artists. There's a huge tech industry that was... it was based in they kept on meeting in a place called Matthew's Yard.
Oh, yeah, I went to that. Yeah.
Yeah, from that point onwards, like, the tech industry exploded in Croydon. I think it's the biggest industry of tech outside Shoreditch, or it certainly was. I'm not sure about it now. It moves so fast, right? But it's got so much going for it. And we've got the Home Office here, so it's a real blend of different cultures, you know. And I love being around in a melting pot. I think it enhances your life, you know.
From what I know of you, you've got two passions, haven't you? Sort of like hairdressing and music.
Yeah. Music, yeah. And also education, like children, like home education. As you know, I didn't send my son to school for a long while. Yeah. And that ties in with what we're doing, which we'll probably talk about later. But those are my two passions. I still love my job. I feel very, very privileged to be a hairdresser. Yeah. And every client or guest I see, whoever they are, wherever they're from, it's just a pleasure and a privilege to do their hair and to express my creativity, but to give, you know, what it's like when you've done somebody's hair and they feel better at the end of the appointment than they did when they came in. I mean, there's just nothing like it. And you get that every day.
I know. We get it every day, and especially when we go to our sessions. What made you get into hairdressing then? What was
basically, because I tried everything else, you know, I just didn't really know what I wanted to do. And strangely, I went to see a career advisor. My mum was desperate with this young girl running rife through the streets of Croydon. And she took me to this old guy in Crystal Palace. And I remember him sitting in the corner. It was a really dark room. And he was asking me all about myself and everything and what I'd done previously and blah, blah, blah. I think I was about 18 or 19. And at the end of it, he said, have you ever thought of hairdressing and beauty? Because obviously the academia was not shining through. And I was like, well, funnily enough, I've forgotten to tell you, but I do work part-time in a hairdresser's. He said, yeah, I think you should do that. And I was really fortunate because in Croydon at the time, I don't think Tony and Guy had yet been established, because that became the main salon in Croydon soon after I started my hairdressing. But the salon that I was working in was the place where all the ballroom dancers in the UK, you know, the people that do strictly dancing, they all came here and had their hair done. And we were doing foil highlights and everyone else was doing the cap type thing. It was that kind of thing, end of the mid-90s. Yeah. And anyway, the woman that ran it, she was literally the only person that had ever believed in me, ever, throughout my whole life, apart from my parents. And she said, you're going to make a brilliant hairdresser. And I just think I owe so much to that woman, because it really means such a lot when somebody says, I believe in you, you know, at such a sort of vulnerable and impressionable age. And she did. And I just went on from there, really. And I actually moved to Tony and Guy and carried on from there. And I was very, very fortunate to be able to travel the world and work in different salons for them. So, yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing.
You know,
people who come across you in life, it's so pivotal, isn't it? Like, if you hadn't come across in that salon, you maybe was in a different one who didn't believe in you. Your paths changed, don't they?
It's so true. It is true. And then also, you know, the clients and the guests that we see, they bring so much to us. Like, we're like fountains of knowledge, I feel, hairdressers, because we just get people from all walks of life, and you just learn so much. It gives you such a great perspective on life, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
Another thing I love about it.
So what got you into music then?
Oh, God. As soon as I heard an electronic beat in my car, I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, I loved it. I was just like, so I was just listening to all the pirate radio stations. Whenever I could, I would go out raving, clubbing. You know, I didn't do drugs. I didn't drink. I was just there for the music. Yeah. And I kept on asking my boyfriends at the time, can you teach me to DJ? Because everybody had a pair of Technics, you know, 1210s. And none of them would, except one guy, Henry, who was a friend of mine. And we were in a club aquarium in Shoreditch. And he goes, I'll teach you. And I was like, cool. So he taught me. And then, I started DJing, and friends recommended me to play on this boat in the Thames. And literally from that point onwards, I got a radio show, pirate radio show. And it just snowballed. I didn't want to become a DJ to do it as a career or, you know, anything like that. It was just a passion of mine. And then when I was getting paid as well, it was like flipping bonus. Do you know what I mean? Like, So I was very, very fortunate. And I kind of rode the wave of, like, it was coming out of garage and it was going into soulful house. And I rode that wave. And there was a lot of female DJs at the time playing soulful house. And we all played on the same radio station together. So we all became quite successful in our own right. And I was playing for people like Head Candy. I was defected once or twice, and I travelled the world, and I was very, again, very fortunate.
Yeah.
Was
that before you had your boy? Was that?
Yeah. So as my relationship was settling down, and I knew I wanted to have kids, I kind of just came off the circuit. And once you come off the circuit, it's quite hard to get back on. Yeah. But I still go out clubbing. Still. Yeah. Going to 93 Feet East this Saturday. Can't bloody wait.
Yes.
But it's more like daytime things. It finishes at 10 p.m, so I'll be tucked up in bed by 11, you know.
Oh, it sounds like my sort of rave.
Perfect. So, but I just love music.
Yeah. So when you had your son, what, because I was fascinated when I first met you, what gave you the decision or made you come to the decision of taking him out of education?
Well, he was never in education. It was like, do I send him to school or not? And the choice of schools was pretty poor where I lived. And he was actually a client. I was doing her hair, and she was home educating him. She was telling me about it for a couple of years, but it just used to go over my head. And then, of course, when you come to make a decision, like quite an important decision about where your child will be educated, I kind of started to listen, and I was like, wow, that sounds quite cool, actually. And I started reading about it. And then when the school choice came in, I was just like, I do not want my son to go to that school. And by that time, I'd kind of decided that I was going to try it anyway. Yeah. And the main reasons were because he could not sit still. And I knew that if he was put into a classroom, he would just be confined. And I think it's okay in the first year of school because they're quite they don't have to sit down at desk. But second, third year, I just knew he would be labelled as naughty. Yeah. He just wouldn't be able to sit down for more than 2 minutes, 5 minutes. And I just didn't want him to be labelled and told as a child when you're so impressionable and your brain is so soft and you're learning all the time that you're not doing the right thing. I just thought that's going to affect him for the rest of his life. Yeah. And I knew it would have done. And it was the best decision I ever made, 100%. Initially, I was going to send him to school when he was 7, like the Scandinavian countries. But by that time, he was just having a whale of a time. You know, we were out every day. We joined a massive community in South London. I think there's currently about 2.8 thousand families in South London that are home educating. So we were part of that community. And there's just things going on all the time, and far, far more than any primary school could ever offer. Ever offer the children. So he was we were doing workshops, museums, beach, woods, everything. He was just living his life. It was just so good. He didn't sit down at a desk until he was about 9. Right. And he taught himself to read and write autonomously, just mainly through gaming. And I just really believe if you leave children to learn, if you let them grow up in an environment where you enrich their environment with their interests and stuff like that, then they will just take it and they will roll and they will learn in their own time. I mean, you know, you kind of think that kids should learn to read and write at age 4, 5, 6. It's just not in their physiology to be able to do that. Like, he couldn't hold a pen till he was 6 or 7, you know, but he's perfectly literate now and reads and writes really well. And I kept him out till he was 12, till he was ready. And sorry to waffle on about it, but it's such a passion of mine. And when he was ready psychologically and emotionally to handle all the things that school brings, because there's a huge amount of pack mentality and that bullying and stuff like that, and relationships are tricky. You're kind of, people say, oh, how are they socialized? Well, in home education, well, he was a lot better socialized because he was socializing with children of all different ages in a free environment. Not forced. It's forced socialization in schools, and you have to either get on or you don't. And that's really, really difficult, especially if your brain's not ready for all of that and your emotions are not ready for all of that. So at 12, he was ready. And also we'd had the pandemic and all the, so home education was slowly coming, all the groups and everything shut down, obviously the same as schools. And it was quite slow coming back up, and I wanted to carry on a bit more work with more of my work. So it kind of just felt about the right time. And he's flying. You've never, ever known he'd not been at school for 9 years. No. And we didn't even study one bit of the curriculum because you don't have to in this country. It's not legal. He had never studied it once, and he's gone in there and he's absolutely fine. Yeah. Imagine. So it just shows you.
Hungry to learn as well. Because now he's
hungry to learn. He's like, Mum, that's why. Because at one point I was like, how you get? He's like, Mum, I'm there to learn and I'm learning stuff. So, and he said that to me, and he's only 13 now. It's amazing. So, and I do believe that it is connected to what we do, because I see so many men that have just, I mean, obviously it's complex and it's not just about not going to school or going to school. I appreciate that. There's many, many reasons for being homeless, but you know, just that detrimental thing, because the boys were forced to sit down when they physically needed to move between the ages of however long it takes. And I just think it's so detrimental to them. And then they grow up thinking they're naughty. Yeah. You know, what do they have?
I've had experience of it. My sister's grandson, you know, is severely autistic, and he just used to have meltdowns because he would get put in a room, isolated because of his behaviour.
Criminal.
It was to a normal kid, it's upsetting, but to him, no, sorry, not normal, to a regular, I don't know, you know what I mean.
Neurotypical. It's
A
called
neurotypical.
neurotypical.
Thank you for that. A neurotypical kid, but like for him, you know, he was devastated. He put down something wrong. He couldn't understand it. Couldn't grasp it, and a complete
Terrible.
meltdown, as if he'd been locked in solitary. You know, like.
Well, the only place that you're allowed to do that is in prisons. Like the things that go on in schools would just not happen in the workplace. They wouldn't be allowed.
No.
So why are we allowing it to happen in schools? I just do not understand it. And if schools are like our own entity into themselves, you know, they really are. And things that go on in there, like isolating children. I've just come back from Newcastle, and I've got a friend who home educates her kids, and she actually now works in a school, and she's like, it just makes my decision to home educate them even more justified, because she constantly sees these things going on, and it's just criminal. I don't know what they think. They're just trying to control them. I get that, but you can't do that to children. It's just awful.
Yeah.
If my son was ever isolated at school, I'd be down there like a shot. I would never have it.
I don't doubt it.
Can you imagine?
I would take you on. I've got. It was interesting. Well, you said about gaming. You know, like you learned from gaming.
Yeah.
And I'm interested. I'm just in part way through a book, Mindfulness for the Frazzled, by Ruby Wax, for myself. You know, but she does branch into mindfulness for children, and it was that she said that they're working on something to do with gaming, but it's got tools in it that enable kids to discover mindfulness. So it's like, rather than, like she says, there's the gaming's there, you know, it's no good start making out it's not there and that they're not allowed to do it. It's part of what their modern day education for them in a way. They can learn different things from it. So why not put the tools in it so that they can use it? And like you said, your boy learned a lot of his literacy from it. You know,
100%. I'd say probably 90% of his literacy. Yeah, it's
a different tool, isn't it? So what, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
No good then being on that machine all day long. Well, you know, like, let's make sure it's a positive experience.
100%. And the other thing as well, and I understand how people parents become very worried, because it is a new era. We've never had this problem before. We're a new generation of parents basically treating sort of what can look like game addiction. But the way I approached it was, and I think this is really important, I said to my son, he can play on the games for as long as he wants.
Yeah.
But gaming cannot get in the way of sleeping, peeing, pooing, eating, exercise, and drinking. As long as he does those 6 things when he needs to do them, then he can game as much as he wants. And he is completely self-regulated on the games. Well, I often come in when he's been, you know, on it for an hour, and he's like picking up his scooter and moving it around and just basically flexing his limbs. Yeah. And I don't think it's almost like a conscious decision to do that. I think it's unconscious, because I've just drummed it into him since he was very, very young. You have to have a break. You have to stop and eat. You have to, you know, and all of that. And that's the way that we approach it. And children do. We've got to trust them, but they do become self-regulated. And it might not be in the time span that we expect them or we want them to do, but it will come. And that's where I think a lot of our society, we don't trust children. And if we trusted them a bit more and gave them a bit more leverage to be a bit more autonomous, you would be surprised at the results, because my son is a perfect example of that. And I know many other children that are in my community, you know.
Well, because it fascinated me. There's sport moving on to Haircuts for Homeless. When we first met, you reached out to me and we looked at Croydon and we managed to get a place for it. You really impressed me as you know, as a single. You were a single mum then, wasn't you?
Yeah, still am.
Yeah.
Proud.
Rock on, single mums. Single mum, self-employed. You know, running your own business, homeschooling, and then found the time to set up a project with us. You know, so I was, you know, and I was really impressed with you, and I used to say to people about you a lot of the time, you know, like, you know, because sometimes people say, I haven't really got time. I say, well, I know this woman. And she's like, yeah. So you did get talked about, you know, autonomous.
Oh, thank you.
But, you know, it struck me, but you did, and you found it because you had that passion about wanting to make it happen. And we started off in Crisis, didn't we, in Croydon? That's where it began.
Yeah, Crisis is such a fantastic organisation. Like, I love Crisis. It's a holistic charity. So they look at everything holistically for their guests. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful charity. The only thing for us was there was a lot of red tape, wasn't there? It was just a little bit difficult.
It did work very well for us because of their... This is the thing, when people don't always understand that we have to partner with certain charities or homeless centres, and we're sort of we lay out what we need from them, but there's also stuff that they need from us, and sometimes it just doesn't fit as well. And it was a bit prohibitive, wasn't it? Because it was so difficult for get a guest from the street in to get a haircut with us. There were so many things to cross. Whereas when we find a place where everyone's there and it's more of an open environment, then we can really perform, can't we?
Yeah, that's right. It's so true because, again, our job is like quite visual, isn't it? Like what we actually do. If somebody sees what we're doing and they see that we're doing it okay, then they're like, oh, hello, you know, and we didn't quite find that in Crisis. I mean, it did work for a couple of years. We kind of battled on through and it was good. Yeah. It was good to get established and really good for me to learn the ropes and get a few little hairdressers aware of what we were doing and stuff like that. And I mean, you know, I had some lovely people come and help me. They were really good. But I think the place where we are now, which is Evolve, isn't it? Even where we're situated, because the front door's in front of us. And there's glass. We're in a room, but there's like a big glass window and a glass door. And everyone who comes through the front door can see us immediately. And so they know what's going on. So they're like, oh, can I go on the list? You know, it's really, really working well. And also, I do like the fact that there's a mixture of men and women in this Evolve, because my passion is to help everybody, but particularly women, because most of the time I can relate to some of their situation. Because of what's happened in my life, you know, I can relate to some of it, and I'm just a huge, big fat feminist. I call myself. And I'm very passionate about helping women.
I'm a big I know you as well, and I love it because life's thrown a few things at me, and some of it's been through my children, like my girls, and you know, and I've got complete empathy. But when I see a woman going through it, and it hits home hard for me, but I think sometimes that natural thing of a woman relating to a woman and a man relating to a man comes to the fore. Like, you know, I've seen you in action with people. You put them at ease. You've got that love and warmth that they, you know, open up to you. And sometimes you don't get that. I do connect quite well with women sometimes, but sometimes there's that little bit of a, you know, I'm not small, so I'm like a bit, you know, I suppose I can be a bit intimidating for someone, a woman who's had a lot of bad experience, you know what I mean? But I also really relate well to the guys, because the guys are me, you know, especially at the end of the spectrum where they're far way down the road of addictions and that I was on, and I feel for them because I know that's where I would have been, you know, 100%. If I was alive still, that's where I would have been. So I think there is sometimes that natural thing of sex for sex, you know, sex is for the sexes. You know, there's a natural, even though we all want to be equal, there are some things that nature's put in their mind.
Yeah, it's also relatable experiences, you know, and I believe in equality, but I think often what people forget is that 50% of the population, i.e. women, we are vulnerable. We're vulnerable in comparison to, you know, if you take the average man, you take the average woman, just on physique alone, we're slightly more vulnerable. And we might be equal or even better in other ways, but essentially when push comes to shove, we are vulnerable, and it's difficult to get that kind of like that that across sometimes, because obviously there are many powerful and amazing women and doing amazing things, but and that's, again, you just see the vulnerability, don't you, when you can see it in both of the sexes, but quite often the women have been made vulnerable by men even more. They've suffered trauma through men, so it's just relatable experiences, I think. But yeah, I am enjoying Evolve. I think that another great charity.
Yeah.
And it's just, again, a privilege to be working on these lovely people's hair, and they are all lovely,
Yeah. We worked together last week, didn't we? Together last week, and there was a lovely lady there, and just at the end, just after, I know you had to go because you had a doctor appointment, and I had to leave because I had a hospital appointment, and I just wish I had the afternoon free, because one of the ladies had a really severely knotted hair, and it just needed a bit of time spent on it. So I am actually posting off a tangle teaser to hopefully one of the people working there might do it for her, before we.
Good.
And I left her some spray oil so that would help to detangle it. But
I'll follow that up.
Yeah, it's so vulnerable. And it is often at the hands of men. Funny enough, though, I've done a lot of stuff in the podcast and in our work about domestic abuse, and they're coming across the figures. Quite surprisingly, I believe it's 1 in 4 women go through it.
Yeah,
but also 1 in 6 men.
Yeah, I do know it's high as that figure's high.
I thought it'd be like 1 in 50, like naively, but it can be. It gets around about 1 in 6, and that can either be, gay relationships but it's quite often heterosexual relationships. So they're getting that from that, and if you've been taught to not fight back, or you can't hit a lady and all that, if you've got someone who's unbalanced and is not frightened to attack you, some of these guys are just standing and taking it, and then they've got the shame of not being able to say it. I can't say a woman's beat me up.
Yeah, definitely. I think the actual figure as well is 1 in 2 women.
That's right.
2 women a week get killed by their male partner.
That's that's a definite. 2 women a week.
2 women a week.
2 women a week get killed.
Shocking.
Yeah.
But equally shocking, with the male. And again, that's another thing to touch on is mental health. Yeah. I don't think I've done a single homeless person who hasn't had mental health problems. Not one. No. Not one single person. And that just demonstrates, the lack of knowledge and the lack of funding and investment and resources that our society, CAMS, which is the Children and Adults Mental Health something, is the basically the arm of the government that look after mental health in schools. But there's always a 2-year waiting list. So you've got a girl at school cutting her wrist, and they're like, well, you've got to wait 2 years. Well, clearly she's going to probably kill herself within that time. But what I'm trying to say is, if CAMS had started like maybe in the 1960s or the 1970s, like we may be so much further on if they'd had that kind of like knowledge to start it all up. But so all through those years, like we're doing the product of the people that had mental health problems and didn't have that support in schools and didn't have it in the home, because that's probably where the trauma was creating or exasperating the mental health. And we're now dealing as a society with those people on different levels, whether they be homeless or not. That's what we're dealing with. I think it's really, really important to highlight is mental health. And it's really important for both men and girls, men and women to talk.
Yeah, definitely to talk. But I am, like I was saying, I'm old enough to remember when the government decided to close a lot of the facilities down of mental health places. And they called it care in the community.
I know, I remember.
Do you remember that?
Vaguely. I was too young, but I do remember this expression, care in the community.
Care in the community. And it became there's no care in the community. All it was is just put them in the community. So people
Yeah.
very, very vulnerable was putting in with no, it didn't match the goal.
Yeah.
It didn't match the actuality of it, and people were just left wandering the streets almost. And it's never really recovered from that, to the point where, even from my own personal experience, I'll share it for anyone who needs to hear it, is that like 5 years ago or something, we lost our business, and I was in such a terrible place. In fact, working with homeless kept me going, kept my gratitude up enough to keep me through it, but it was a very dark place. And in the beginning of the pandemic, I had another series of events that did it. And most recently, the last few months, I've really hit a dark place. And even though I've got my recovery and I've got tools in place that we get through on a day-to-day basis of staying sober, I needed more. And I found a doctor, and they recommended me to talking therapies. I got to speak to a mental health nurse. She pretty much said, look, there's nothing much we can do at the moment, the budgets and stuff, but you must say that I've referred you and ring this talking therapies. Now, I did that a few years ago when I lost my business, and they phoned me 6 months later for a call back. By which time, I remember I was driving to a homeless project, and it came out and said, it's talking therapy, behaviour and talking therapy. And I said, yeah. And I thought, one of the kids has had an episode or something. And then she went, yeah, it's about you. You called? And I said, that was 6-7 months ago. And I said, I could have been dead by now.
Yeah.
You went to me. I take it you don't need the appointment then, and hung up on me.
You're kidding, really?
No, I swear. And this time it's been better. And evidently that I did hear through someone that Havering has had some more funding go into this area. So there is more facility. And this time round, I have had someone call me back, and I'm on a list. We had a long chat. They said I need PTSD therapy.
Wow, that's
good. It's deep rooted, but I'm on a list that goes to a panel once every 2 weeks, so they can discuss so many cases during the time they're together. And if you're not got on that, you have to wait for the next 2 weeks, or probably the 2 weeks after that. But hopefully, it's going to be weeks rather than months.
Yeah.
What my message is to people, like, if you are struggling, you're suffering, don't think you can't get any help. Do try to get the help, and do bear with it and keep insisting on it in case because if you've not got, as myself, I mean, I've got other things going on, so I can't really afford to go and pay for private counselling. But if your only option is, like a lot of people we know, they've just got to have what they can be given. Hopefully, just make yourself known to them and keep making yourself known to them. If they give you, I'll just keep emailing them to say how you're feeling, and also try and do some of the stuff you can do yourself. As I say, Ruby Wax's book, I've got it in the van on loop, and I'm just listening to the mindfulness and the tools and this sort of stuff. You can laugh at it, but some people mock it. But if you get a couple of helpful tools out of it, they can make all the difference for you.
Yeah, it's so true. And you're so brave to do that. And it doesn't get commended enough, to go and ask for help. And it really, really should, especially amongst men. It's often, too late, or they just don't do it at all. They get through an episode, and then, they just bumble on, and then another crisis will happen, but then they just don't ask for help. I mean, I know people close to me that are like that, and it's such a shame. It's difficult. I think with talking therapies though as well, I think if you've been in the system once, you can self-refer. So you don't even know how to go to your GP. You can just go to NHS talking therapies on Google and just self-refer, which I think is fantastic. And I think probably they've got a little bit better because of the pandemic, because obviously people that was just an absolute crisis waiting to happen, all the lockdowns and everything. That really has affected, generation upon generation of children and adults. It was a really tough time. So I think they've had no choice but to invest more and just be a bit more mindful themselves of what we need, as a society. But that's another reason why our job is so good as well, because I feel like we listen. Sometimes if people haven't got that ability to, because some people can't write emails, or they don't know what to do, they get overwhelmed and they just cannot physically do what they need to do to go and get talking therapies, for example. So when we come in sometimes and we're just with them for that hour, I've stood there and I've been cutting somebody's hair and I've had tears pouring down my cheeks because of the stories that these people are telling me, and you're just like, oh my God, it just brings everything into perspective. But it's wonderful for them because they might not have actually gone into depth, about it, or you know what I mean? And I just feel like it's almost like a therapy session as well. And I know that's banded around a lot, but for these people it really is sometimes. I don't know whether you were there I think it wasn't when you were this week, it was the last month that I did two brothers. I think you did one of the brothers this time. They're two brothers and their mother was murdered when they were like 6 or 7. And they were put into homes and they were separated, because that's what happened back in the 80s. And they've never recovered from that, and both of them are alcoholics. What chance did these kids have if their mother was murdered and raped and murdered, and then they were separated as young boys and just moved from foster home to foster home to foster home and abused in those situations? That's what happened. What chance these people's got?
No, and people say, "Oh, what can you do?" You're just cutting the hair. But the difference is what you've just said. You can listen, and I've often been approached by people who work in the centres that we're at, and they say a particular guest, they'll go, I've never seen them engage with someone like that. We've got professionals who they just won't engage with. And then I've just sort of been hearing that how they've opened up to you. And it's because it's that little bit of detachment, isn't it? We're not part of the system. We're just a little bright part of their day,
And we're actually caring for them because we're doing their hair. They probably haven't had many people care for them throughout their whole life. Not genuine, unadulterated, 100% giving them that hour to actually care for them and do something for them with no strings attached. Do you know what I mean? It's so like intricate on so many levels what we do, and getting close to them, the intimacy as well. It's intimate in a social sense.
And this what's emanating from you now is that anyone who wanting to be a team leader for Haircuts for Homeless, if you've got the passion that Annabelle's got, you're going to make a great team leader. Because it's no good doing it as a thing you think you ought to do, or something that the odd person may even want to do it to raise their profile or something. It does happen. But if you've got this genuine passion for people, you are going to make a great team leader. But what we also need now, as we come to the end of it, we need to really try and call out we desperately need volunteers, don't we?
Yeah, we really do. I mean, before the pandemic at Crisis, when we were at Crisis, I had a whole team of people. It was great. Maybe because it was new or something like that. I'm not too sure. I don't know whether it's the industry changing as well, because I've had a few problems. I've been like bouncing from salon to salon. I'm self-employed within salons, and I've had a few issues in salons as well. And I just don't know what's going on. But anyway, whatever it is, and it's only 2 hours, but you don't even have to do the full 2 hours, right? You could just do 1 hour or however you feel comfortable. And you can come within. It's 1 to 3 p.m. on the first Tuesday of every month in a central Croydon location. And you don't have to come for all of that time. You can come for some part of it or all of it. Once a month.
It's a couple of hours once a month.
Once a month.
Other people. And if you can't, I'm going to be strong on it. If you can't spare that for other people, you may want to question the balance in your life. And I'll reiterate, the gratitude and the pleasure you get from it will feed you for the next 3 weeks, because it feeds the soul, doesn't it?
It does. And everyone is so grateful and so polite. And sometimes as well, I've heard hairdressers worrying about if people are clean. Yeah. Well, of course they're clean. They're probably just the same as when you work in a normal salon, people coming in and maybe they haven't washed their hair that morning. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's just nothing different to from working in a salon, but just a lot more rewarding.
Yeah. Yeah. And it depends on the places. I mean, somewhere where we go, like the Croydon one is that they're living there, or staying there, but they've got facilities that they often go and wash their hair, so we can do sometimes they fib, don't they, and say they've washed it.
Yeah, they do sometimes fib.
And
it's the ones you would never think they would fib. Yeah, we saw you. We caught you.
But yeah, we know. I know the minute that hairdryer goes on that hair, if that's been wet down instead of washed, trust me, I know immediately, and I did. And you get a very quick blow dry, and it's not very good because it's not clean. But if we'll do it, we'll do it.
Yeah, of course.
And sometimes it's street homeless and they've not been out of wash for a long time. But it's not that bad. The more you do, it's not that bad. And you just do the best you can with what you're given. And, it's like, it can really, really give you a great new focus on life if you volunteer for this.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, one other thing that I've really got from it is that I'm not afraid of homeless people that I see on the street anymore. I'm really not. Like, before I would just walk past and I'd be like, oh my God, that's so awful. But I just keep walking. I might give them a bit of money or whatever. Yeah. But now I just be like, are you all right, mate? How are you? You know what I mean? Especially, if it's someone that looks in need, like, are you okay? Can I help you? It's just given me that confidence because I don't know. I just don't know. Yeah, it has really changed the way I approach homeless people, and it's made me even more empathetic. Empathy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But to be honest as well, it makes you because what you realise is it's just people.
Yeah.
They're just people. They've got different circumstances, but they're just people, and they can be nice, they can be nasty, but so can we all. And they've just had and sometimes they've just had a shitload of bad luck in a row. That's just domino effect, and they've ended up down there. But they bounce back sometimes. It's not,
Yeah, they do.
And it's not for us to judge. But if we just give a bit of happiness and a bit of warmth. So yeah, we are. You're not alone. We've opened over 80 now across the UK. Some have closed. Some are still carrying on, firing away. Some are new ones. But of all of those, everyone's got the same problem. So it's not just Croydon, it's Manchester, it's Liverpool, it's Sheffield, it's Southend. So we need to really get the message out to people that even though times are tough, look, I know people are skint, and the thought of giving up half a day when they can maybe go and earn some money is a tough decision to make. But having said that, it's not too much to ask for. So, and as I say, it'll refresh your soul, which maybe will lead you to have a bit more energy and love for life that will end up making you earn a bit more money anyway. So don't neglect that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I do believe, I know it's an age-old saying, but in karma and what goes around comes around. And I don't, you never do it for that. No. But my life has definitely been richer since I've started it. And I don't know whether it's that or what, I don't know, but I definitely know that my life has definitely been richer since I started. So thank you, Stu.
You're very welcome. Thank you. And I'm so pleased when we got Croydon going again. And we'll make it happen. We will make it happen, but we do. It'll come back. Yeah. Right. Thank you, Annabelle.
That's all right.
Your day. And but we'll get this out as soon as possible. We'll put the links for Evolve and all the other stuff. If you want to put any links for the home education and stuff, we'll put all that on there. Anyone who's interested in any of it, it's been
brilliant. I'll send you a bit of info. Thank you so much for having me. I feel very honoured and privileged to be here. So I really appreciate it. Thanks, Stu.